The wind howled through the cracked wooden window pane as Gabe McAllister sat at his old desk. The ranch house groaned with age, much like the man himself, weathered, silent, and bearing the invisible scars of loss. The lamp flickered, casting a soft amber glow on the paper before him. His hand hovered over the page, ink-stained fingers trembling slightly as he gripped the pen. This wasn't something men like him were meant to do, write letters asking for help. But desperate hearts often silence pride. He finally began to write, slowly, plainly, "To whom it may concern, I am a widowed rancher with 2 young sons. Life out here is rough, and though I don't seek love, I need a woman willing to help raise my boys and manage a home. In return, I offer shelter, respect, and a share in the land. I'm not promising a fairy tale, just an honest life. Gabe McAllister, Prairie Wind Ranch, Montana Territory." He read it once, then folded the letter neatly. The paper was creased, like his heart, pressed and handled too many times. He sealed the envelope and stared at it for a long time before rising from his chair and stepping out into the chilly dawn. The post rider wouldn't wait, and Gabe couldn't afford to hesitate. The boys needed more than a ghost of a father. They needed something steady, someone kind. Hundreds of miles away, in a town where the buildings were cramped and the dreams even smaller, Evelyn Harper closed her classroom door behind her. The echo of empty desks followed her down the hall like a sigh. She walked home under a sky stained gray, holding her thin coat tighter around her. The streets bustled with noise, but none of it reached her. She had no family, no suitor, no reason to stay in a place that had long stopped feeling like home. That evening, she sat at her small kitchen table, spooning cold soup into a chipped bowl. The newspaper lay open in front of her. She didn't usually read the classifieds, but something about the bold heading caught her eye. Wife wanted, not for love, but for life. She frowned, intrigued and a little amused. But as she read the words, her heart shifted. The man's honesty was arresting. No flowery promises, just raw need. She reread it, then again, and something in her whispered, "What else do you have waiting here?" Days passed, and the letter sat on her table, haunting her like a ghost of a road not taken. She thought about her students, about the stifling expectations of town, about the way people looked at her like someone who had missed a train of her life. But she wasn't dead. Not yet. And maybe, out there in that vast, unknown prairie, something was waiting. Evelyn sat down, pulled out a sheet of her best stationery, and began to write. "Dear Mr. McAllister, I've read your ad with care. I may not be the strongest woman nor the bravest, but I am willing. I've worked with children for years. I know how to teach, to clean, to work hard. I have no family, no ties. I seek nothing but purpose and safety. If you believe I might be of use to your home, I'll come." She signed it quietly, Evelyn Harper. When she dropped the letter into the postbox, her hand shook. There was no turning back now. 2 weeks later, a response arrived. The envelope bore dust smudges and rugged handwriting. Inside was a note that read simply, "If you're truly willing, the train arrives at Cold River Station in 2 weeks. I'll be there. GM." That was it. No flattery, no persuasion. Just direction and acceptance. Evelyn stared at the letter, holding it close to her chest. She'd never done something so bold. And yet, it didn't feel reckless. It felt like survival, like hope dressed in plain words. The day she left, it was raining. No one saw her off. She packed a small trunk, wore her best traveling dress, and pinned her hat tightly to her hair. On the platform, the train billowed smoke like a beast breathing fire. She stepped inside with trembling knees, clutching Gabe's letter in her gloved hands. As the train pulled away from the station, the city shrank into memory. Her face was pressed to the window, eyes fixed on the open landscape that would soon be her life. Fear sat in her chest like a stone. What if he was cruel? What if the boys hated her? What if she was too soft for ranch life? But woven beneath that fear was something else, a spark of curiosity, a flicker of courage. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible, "You wanted a new beginning. Evelyn, this is it." And as the train sped westward to the rising sun, she held on to Gabe McAllister's letter like a lifeline, unaware that her journey into the unknown would lead her straight into the heart of a broken family, and perhaps the mending of her own. The train let out a long, tired whistle as it pulled into Cold River Station. Evelyn stepped off with her single trunk, boots crunching on gravel, eyes scanning the quiet, unfamiliar platform. A dust-laced breeze tugged at her coat and her nerves. There was no crowd, no welcoming committee, just a worn wooden bench, a stray dog in a corner, and one man standing by a hitched wagon. He was tall, broader than she expected, and stood with the kind of stillness only the lonely possess. A weathered hat shaded his eyes, and his face, though young, looked like it had known too many winters. He didn't wave or smile. He simply nodded, one short, deliberate gesture. "You Evelyn Harper?" he asked, voice low and gritty like gravel on leather. She swallowed, then nodded back. "Yes. And you're Mr. McAllister?" "Gabe," he replied. He reached down, lifting her heavy trunk like it weighed nothing, then gestured to the wagon. She climbed up, tried to ignore how awkward she felt, perched beside a stranger with whom she had promised to build a life. No words were exchanged for several minutes as the wagon creaked away from the station and into the wild silence of the open prairie. The land stretched in every direction, flat brown, with patches of dry grass and fence lines that looked half-fallen. It was beautiful in a barren, lonely sort of way. Evelyn clutched her coat tighter, her heart thudding like hooves inside her chest. "You expected something different?" Gabe asked suddenly, catching her glancing around. She blinked. "No, I just haven't seen this much sky in a long time." He nodded, eyes forward. "You'll get used to it." They reached the ranch an hour later. The house was modest, a weather-beaten structure of unpainted wood with a sagging porch. A windmill turned lazily in the background, and two boys stood by the fence, watching the wagon roll in. Both had dark hair like their father and the same wary eyes. The big one's Ben. He's 10. The smaller one's Tommy. He just turned 7, Gabe said, lifting the trunk down and placing it on the porch. "They're good boys. Quiet. Like me." Evelyn stepped out of the wagon and offered a warm smile to the children. Ben gave a nod, almost polite. Tommy hid behind his older brother's sleeve, peeking at her like she was a ghost. "Hello," she said gently. "It's nice to meet you both." They didn't reply, but their eyes never left her. Inside, the house was cleaner than she expected. Sparse but well kept. A few chairs, a table with uneven legs, and a cold hearth made up the front room. There was no decoration, no warmth, just utility. Gabe led her down the hall. "This will be your room. It was my wife's before she passed. I cleared her things." He paused, uncomfortable. "Didn't know if that would bother you." Evelyn stepped into the room. The bed was made, and a small dresser stood against the wall. There was one window, framing a view of the endless plains. It wasn't much, but it was hers now. "Thank you," she said softly. He stood at the door, not entering. "There's no expectation. Not unless you want there to be. You'll have your own space, and I'll respect that." She looked at him, at the way he held himself, stiff and careful, like a man afraid to break something fragile. "I understand," she replied. That evening, dinner was quiet. Gabe cooked stew and hard bread. The boys sat with their backs straight, spoons clinking in their bowls. Evelyn ate slowly, watching them, trying to read between the silences. "Do you like books?" she asked Tommy, who flinched slightly at the sound of her voice. Ben answered for him. "He only knows how to read a little. Pa tried to teach us, but he's too busy." "I'd be happy to help, if it's all right," Evelyn offered, glancing at Gabe. He shrugged. "If they want it, fine." Tommy looked at her, this time with a flicker of something softer in his eyes. After dinner, Gabe went out to check the livestock. Evelyn helped the boys with the dishes. She noticed how Tommy's hands were too small for the heavy plates, and how Ben moved like he'd been doing it for years. Too responsible for someone so young. "You don't have to call me Ma or anything," she said quietly. "You can just call me Evelyn. Or Miss Evelyn, if that's easier." Ben studied her. "You staying long?" "I hope to," she replied truthfully. He gave a small nod, then dried the last bowl without another word. Later, she stood in her room, unpacking the few belongings she'd brought: a hairbrush, a worn book of poems, and her father's old scarf. Her fingers grazed a folded letter from Gabe, still tucked inside her coat pocket. She sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, tired breath. Outside, she could hear the wind brushing against the walls, the occasional neigh of a horse. This was not a dream. This was her life now. She whispered to the silence, "What did I just walk into?" The morning air was crisp and carried the scent of dry grass and distant pine. Evelyn woke before sunrise, the faint creak of the windmill outside her window becoming a quiet companion. She dressed quickly and stepped into the cold hallway, where the silence of the house felt like something she had to break with purpose. In the kitchen, she lit the stove and began boiling water for coffee, fumbling with the unfamiliar iron kettle. The boys entered slowly, rubbing sleep from their eyes, surprised to find someone other than their father already there. "I thought I'd get breakfast started," she offered, her voice gentle, unsure. Ben gave a small nod and sat. Tommy kept quiet, eyes darting between her hands and her face, uncertain if this new presence was permanent or passing. Later that day, Evelyn followed Gabe to barn, asking if she could help with the animals. He handed her a worn bucket of feed. "You don't need to do this," he muttered, not looking at her. "I want to earn my place here," she replied. "This is my home now, too, isn't it?" He finally looked at her, his eyes narrowed by sun and years of holding back. "Just remember something, Miss Harper. This ain't love. It's a deal. You help with the boys, the house. I provide shelter and food. That's all." She nodded, her throat tightening. I didn't expect anything more. But the words stung, not because they surprised her, but because some small, fragile part of her had hoped they wouldn't be said out loud. Throughout the week, Evelyn began to learn the rhythm of ranch life. She scrubbed floors with aching knees, chopped vegetables with callous fingers, and tried to understand the silence that filled the house like smoke. She read to the boys in the evenings, pausing to help them sound out the hard words. Tommy never spoke much, but he listened. Ben watched everything, like a hawk measuring whether to trust the wind. In the quiet of her room one night, she sat at the small desk, candlelight flickering against the pages of her old poetry book. Her eyes drifted to the window, and without warning, a memory surged, vivid and unwelcome. She had once been in love. James had been a teacher at her old school, charming, clever, full of promises. He had spoken of marriage and travel, of a life beyond the dusty town. She had believed him, even when others whispered, even when he began staying late with the pretty girls in the front row, even when the engagement ring never came. One rainy evening, he vanished. No letter, no goodbye, only silence and the scandal that followed her like a shadow. The school stopped giving her classes. Her parents called it shameful. Evelyn stopped dreaming until she saw Gabe's letter. One afternoon, she was in the garden, trying to clear weeds from a neglected patch near the porch. Tommy stood on the steps, clutching a ragged doll. She looked up and smiled. "Would you like to help me plant something here?" she asked. He hesitated, then came down the steps, dropping to his knees beside her. They didn't speak, but together they made a small line in the dirt. It wasn't much, but it was something. From the porch, Ben watched silently, arms folded. Dinner that evening was a simple stew: potatoes, carrots, bits of salted beef. Evelyn stirred slowly, the scent reminding her of Sunday suppers long ago. She set the table and called the boys. Gabe came in from the barn, washing his hands quietly at the basin. They sat, 4 people, 1 table, 1 silence. She served each bowl with care. The clatter of spoons was the only sound. No stories, no laughter, only the distant howl of wind and the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth. She looked at them, these strangers, this house, this life she had chosen. It felt both too big and too small. But she didn't regret coming. She'd expected hardship. She just hadn't expected to feel so invisible. The sky had turned a bruised shade of gray, stretching endlessly above the plains like a warning. Evelyn stood on the porch, apron damp from the humidity, eyes fixed on the approaching clouds. The wind had shifted, carrying with it the scent of rain and something electric. Gabe stepped out beside her, wordless as always, gaze narrowed toward the horizon. "Storm's coming," he finally muttered, adjusting his hat. "And it won't be small." She nodded. "We should bring in the wash." Together, they moved quickly, pulling clothes from the line, gathering tools left in the yard, securing windows. The boys came running from a barn as the first drops began to fall. Thunder rumbled low in the distance, like a beast waking up. By nightfall, the storm had taken hold. Rain pounded against the roof in waves. The wind howled through every crack and gap in the walls, rattling shutters and moaning like ghosts. Lightning lit up the rooms in white flashes, and the boys sat close on the floor near the fire, pale and quiet. Evelyn set down a tray of tea on the small table and sat beside them. She could see Tommy flinch with every thunderclap, his small hands gripping the hem of his shirt. She leaned in gently. "It's just noise," she said softly. "Big and scary, but it can't hurt you in here." But he wouldn't meet her eyes. The next bolt of lightning lit up the room again, and a sharp clap of thunder made him cry out. Crawling into her lap without warning, Evelyn wrapped her arms around him and pulled him close. She began to hum, a soft old lullaby, the same one her mother used to sing when the world outside felt too loud. Her voice was low, unsteady at first, but warm. Tommy's breathing slowed. Even Ben, though trying to act unaffected, moved a little closer. From the shadows near the doorway, Gabe watched. He said nothing, but something flickered in his eyes. A softness, a memory, perhaps, or a longing he'd buried deep. Later that night, with the boys asleep near the hearth, Evelyn sat on the old couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The storm still roared, but inside was warm, firelight casting gentle shadows on the walls. Gabe poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to her without a word. She accepted it with a nod, surprised by the gesture. For a few minutes, they sipped in silence, the storm between them, and yet somehow drawing them closer. "I used to be afraid of storms," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. He looked at her. "What changed?" Evelyn stared into the fire, then took a breath. "There was a man once," she began. "He made promises, said I was his whole world. I believed him, thought we'd build something together, a home, maybe children, but he disappeared, left without a word. I was the fool, not him. The town talked. My job vanished. My parents stopped speaking to me. I was a storm." Gabe didn't speak right away. The fire crackled. The wind howled. Then he said quietly, "You got more heart than most folks I've met." She turned her head, startled by the kindness in his voice. "Storms don't break people like you," he added. "They shape Em." Her eyes welled, but she smiled, small, tired but real, the first smile in weeks. And Gabe, watching her in that moment, realized something had shifted. Not just the weather, not just the silence in the house. Something inside him. It was a crisp, dusty morning when Gabe hitched the wagon. Evelyn climbed up, smoothing her dress, nervously glancing toward the ranch house where Ben and Tommy waited. Gabe had invited her to ride into town with him. A small gesture, but one that stirred butterflies in her stomach. It would be her first time in town since arriving. The road into town felt long. The landscape passed in silence. The boys dozing lightly in the back with feed sack as a pillow, and Gabe quiet as ever beside her. Evelyn tried to enjoy the breeze, but a tightness in her chest wouldn't leave. The town of Dry Creek wasn't large, but it had eyes. As they entered the market square, Evelyn could feel the stares, sharp and assessing. Whispers fluttered like leaves around her. Women leaned into one another. Men paused mid-step. "That's not his wife," one woman murmured near the mercantile. "She's too proper for ranch life," another added, watching Evelyn's unsure steps. Evelyn kept her chin up, but the weight of their judgment pressed down hard. She could almost hear their thoughts. Outsider, imposter, scandal. Inside the general store, she busied herself collecting fabric, canned goods, and flour. Gabe handed over the coins silently, offering her a nod of approval. But the storekeeper's wife gave her a once-over that left her cheeks burning. As she stepped back outside with a parcel under her arm, A voice called from behind. Well, Evelyn Carter. She froze. That voice, smooth, smug, and unwelcome, belonged to Richard Barnes, her old suitor. He stood tall, dressed like a city man, with a crooked smirk on his face. "I thought I heard whispers," he said. "Didn't think it'd be you they were about." Evelyn stiffened. "What do you want, Richard?" He stepped closer, voice low but cruel. "Just wondering what kind of decent woman answers an ad for a wife like she's shopping for a husband. Townsfolk say you moved in with a widower. No ring, no vows. Same Evelyn, still chasing belonging." Before Evelyn could speak, a shadow loomed beside her. "Gabe, she's with me now," he said, voice low and firm. "And I don't take kindly to men talking that way to a lady." Richard scoffed. "Didn't mean to ruffle your arrangement." Gabe stepped forward. One look from him, and Richard took a step back. They left the store in silence, the mood thick with tension. Evelyn walked fast, trying to hide the heat behind her eyes. She felt exposed, like her past had followed her here and stripped her bare in front of strangers. But just outside the bakery, a voice piped up. "Hey, your new ma's a disgrace." Tommy turned around first, fists clenched. A boy his age had said it, laughing, emboldened by others nearby. "She's not his real ma," the boy added. "Just some city lady pretending." Before Evelyn could stop them, both Ben and Tommy stood in front of her like guards. Ben stepped forward. "Don't talk about her like that," he said sharply. "She makes us hot meals and reads us stories. That's more than most real mothers ever did." Tommy added, "Yeah, and she's braver than you. She rides horses and cooks stew." The other boy blinked, taken aback. Then he ran off. Evelyn knelt down, arms out. The boys hesitated a moment, then stepped into her hug. Her throat tightened as she held them. "Thank you," she whispered. Ben shrugged, trying to act tough. "We just don't like liars." When Gabe returned from across the street with a sack of feed, he paused at the sight. Evelyn holding the boys, the three of them huddled like a small pack against the judgment of the world. That evening, the tension had melted away. Evelyn prepared dinner. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Gabe helped peel potatoes in awkward silence. The boys teased each other as they set the table, laughing. After dinner, they sat outside under a violet sky, watching stars appear one by one. Ben cracked a joke about Gabe's cooking skills, which made even Gabe smirk. Evelyn laughed, really laughed, the sound free and unguarded. Gabe looked at her, and something softened in his expression. She caught his gaze and, for once, didn't look away. It was a small moment, a laugh, a shared glance, but something shifted. They weren't just strangers anymore. Not just a man, a woman, and two boys. Something like a family was beginning to form. The prairie wind was gentle that morning, the sun warm but not cruel. Evelyn knelt in front of the porch, hands deep in the soil as she planted the first row of daisies. Her fingers were dirty, her dress dusty, but there was peace in her chest, a small, blooming kind. For the first time since arriving, she wasn't surviving, she was adding something to this land. Tommy sat on the porch step, watching her with lazy curiosity. "Why flowers?" he asked, wrinkling his nose. "You can't eat, Em." Evelyn smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "Not everything has to feed your stomach. Some things feed your heart." Later that day, she sat with Ben by the kitchen table, a well-worn reader open between them. He stumbled over a sentence, frustration rising. Evelyn gently touched his hand. "Slow down. Sound it out." He sighed, then tried again, this time smoother. At the end, she clapped softly and his face lit up. "No one ever had time to teach me proper," he admitted. "You're learning fast," she said. "You've got a smart head, Ben McAllister." He ducked his head, but she saw the smile he tried to hide. That evening, as she poured water into cups, Gabe entered the kitchen, wiping his hands with a cloth. "Miss," he stopped himself. "Evelyn." She turned, surprised. He'd never used her name before. Not once. Would you mind helping with the south fence tomorrow? The storm loosened some posts. She nodded slowly. Of course. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary, then gave a small nod and walked out. It was just her name, but from him, it felt like a door slowly creaking open. The next morning, she woke early and made a peach pie. The crust was uneven, the fruit canned from last season, but the scent filled the kitchen like something sacred. Tommy ran in first. Is that pie? For breakfast. Not for breakfast, she said with a laugh, but maybe after chores. Ben peeked in next. Can I lick the spoon? Even Gabe lingered by the doorway a little longer than usual, inhaling deeply. Smells like something real, he muttered. She watched him take a second look at the pie cooling on the counter. He notices, she thought. Fixing the south fence wasn't easy work, but Evelyn insisted on helping. Gabe brought the tools and did most of the heavy lifting, but she held the rails steady, wiped sweat from her brow, and didn't complain once. They didn't talk much, only the occasional hold this or past that. But the silence between them wasn't tense anymore. It felt companionable. At one point, their hands brushed as they reached for the same hammer. Neither pulled away. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of earth and sun-warmed wood. Gabe looked over at her and murmured, "You don't scare easy, do you?" She smiled. Not anymore. They sat under the shade of a cottonwood tree afterward, sharing a canteen of warm water. Back in the city, she said, watching the sky, a broken fence would have been someone else's problem. Gabe chuckled, a quiet, gravelly sound she'd never heard before. Here, everything's our problem. He glanced at her. You make things better around here. You know that. She turned to him, startled. He added, almost reluctantly, I didn't know a house could feel alive again. Her breath caught in her throat. The words weren't flowery, but coming from Gabe McAllister, a man who barely spoke his own name, they meant the world. That night, as the family sat down to dinner, the boys argued over who got the bigger slice of pie. Evelyn pretended to scold them. Gabe just shook his head with a ghost of a smile. The lantern flickered softly on the table. Outside, crickets chirped and the sky turned dark in velvet. Evelyn looked around the table. Mismatched plates, dust still on the windowsill, boots by the door, and felt something warm settle in her chest. This wasn't her home by blood or birth, but it was beginning to feel like hers, piece by piece. The air was heavier that morning, not with weather, but with something else. Evelyn stood on the porch with a fresh basket of laundry when a dust trail kicked up on the road beyond the fence. A carriage rolled toward the ranch, unfamiliar and too polished for prairie roads. She squinted, heart thudding oddly in her chest. As the carriage stopped, a tall, sharp-featured man stepped out. His suit was wrinkled, but his posture stiff, and his eyes cold and sharp. "Evelyn," he called, "so this is where you've been hiding." The laundry slipped from her hands. Her throat tightened. "Charles." He smirked, stepping closer. "Thought you could vanish without a word? Thought you could shame me and move on like none of it mattered?" The boys watched from the barn, curiosity turning to unease. Gabe stepped out of the stable slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth, assessing the stranger. Charles turned, sizing Gabe up. "Is this the man you ran away for? A rancher? Really, Evelyn? How far you fallen?" Evelyn's cheeks burned, not from shame, but from fury. "I didn't run from you," she said, voice steady. "I ran for what you did, from who you were." Charles scoffed. "I gave you everything. A place in society, my name. You humiliated me." Before Evelyn could answer, Charles looked toward the boys. "And these? Are you pretending to play mother now? What a joke." Ben stepped forward instinctively, but Gabe placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. Then, slowly, Gabe walked up to Charles. "No one insults my boys," he said flatly, "and no one insults her." Charles laughed. "What are you going to do? Glare me to death?" The crack of Gabe's fist hitting Charles's jaw echoed, louder than any gunshot. Charles stumbled back, bleeding lip, shocked silence. Gabe stepped forward. "You don't belong here." You had your chance. She's not yours. She never was. Now get off my land. Charles looked at Evelyn again, but this time his confidence faltered. Whatever power he thought he had was gone. He climbed back into his carriage without another word, and the dust trail carried him away once more, but this time it felt final. Inside, Evelyn stood at the sink, shoulders stiff, hands trembling as she scrubbed a clean dish over and over. Gabe stepped in quietly. "He's gone," he said. She nodded, not turning. "It doesn't matter. I always ruin things. It's what I do. I come in good things. Good people get hurt." Gabe walked to her slowly, placed a dishcloth on the counter, and turned her gently to face him. "No," he said firmly. "You don't ruin things. You fix what's broken." He looked into her eyes, a softness in his voice she hadn't heard before. "You fixed this house, Evelyn. Made it warm again. The boys, they laugh more now. Ben reads. Tommy sings. You planted flowers in a place that didn't even know what color was anymore." She tried to speak, but he stopped her, his hand hovering near her cheek. "You even fixed me, and I didn't think I could be fixed." Tears spilled silently down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from relief, from finally hearing words she'd longed to believe all her life. "I don't know what this is between us, Gabe," she whispered, "but I think it matters." He nodded. "It does. It matters more than I ever thought anything could again." She leaned into his chest, and he held her, not with desperation, not with duty, but with quiet certainty. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, touching the earth like a promise kept. The morning sun lit the ranch in golden hues, casting a soft warmth over everything it touched. Evelyn stood by the porch, brushing crumbs off her apron as the boys ran circles around the yard with wooden sticks, pretending to duel dragons. For a moment, she simply watched. The laughter, the breeze, the quiet hum of life she never imagined she'd have. Then Gabe appeared behind her, clearing his throat softly. "Come with me," he said, voice low but certain. She followed him past the corral, beyond the grazing pasture, and toward a grove of trees she hadn't explored before. Nestled at the edge of the clearing stood a small cabin, freshly painted, with clean windows and a rocking chair already set on the front porch. Evelyn's brow furrowed. "What is this?" Gabe took off his hat, rubbing the brim nervously before meeting her eyes. "It's yours. For you, for us." Her breath caught. "I rebuilt it," he added. "Started a few months back, when I realized you weren't just passing through." Evelyn stepped forward slowly, running her fingers over the wood grain of the doorframe. Everything about the cabin spoke of care, from a flower box under the window to the carved initials on the porch post. G+E. She turned to him. "Why?" He took a step closer, still holding his hat like it was the only thing grounding him. "Because you made this place feel like home, and I want it to be yours. I want me to be yours. If you'll have me." Her heart thundered, her breath uneven. For a moment, all the voices from her past tried to rise. The fear, the doubt, the old heartbreaks. But they faded beneath the steady gaze of the man before her. Gabe, rugged, quiet, loyal to a fault, was offering her not just a place, but a promise. "I need to be clear," he said, voice softer now. "This ain't out of need. I can raise the boys. I can run the ranch. But I don't want to do it without you anymore. I love you, Evelyn." She looked away, blinking fast. "Try not to cry? You sure?" He nodded. "Sure as sunrise." A beat passed. Then Evelyn smiled, the slow, bright kind of smile that starts from deep inside. "All right," she whispered. "Yes, I'll stay. I'll marry you." Gabe exhaled, relief and joy mixing on his face. She added with a teasing smirk, "But only if I still get to make the rules." Gabe chuckled, stepping forward to wrap his arms around her. "Deal," he whispered into her ear. Later that evening, the family gathered in the cabin. Ben and Tommy explored every corner, already making plans for where to put their books and toy swords. Evelyn baked a pie, and Gabe helped her hang the curtains she'd sewn weeks ago, not knowing they'd end up here. They didn't need a big ceremony. The vows were in every glance, every helping hand, every word unspoken. A few days later, the four of them rode together across the ranch, Evelyn on her own horse, the boys trailing close behind, shouting with glee. Gabe rode beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers. The sky above was a wide canvas of orange and pink as the sun dipped low over the fields. Evelyn looked out over the golden expanse, the wind playing with her hair. This land, once dry and foreign, now felt like a living part of her. It held her laughter, her labor, her healing, and now her future. She turned to Gabe, her eyes shining. "It's beautiful." He nodded. "So are you." Behind them, the boys hooped and chased each other, their laughter rolling like thunder across the plains. And Evelyn realized she hadn't just come to help raise two boys. She had helped rebuild a family, and in return, she had found her place in the world. Last line, she came to be a helper, but became their heart, their hope, their forever.